So good morning. I'd like to call the session of the Public Service Commission to order. Secretary Burgess, are there any changes on the agenda today?
There are several changes to the agenda this morning. Item 201A, case 14M0183, which is a joint petition of Time Warner Cable and Comcast Corporation for approval of a holding company level transfer of control, is over. Item 201B, case 14M0219, the joint petition of Charter Communications and Comcast Corporation for approval of a transfer of control of subsidiaries and franchises, is over. Item 164, case OHG1015, petition of Niagara Mohawk Power Corporation for approval of an energy efficiency portfolio standard. The Fast Track Utility Administered Gas Energy Efficiency Program is over. Item 366, case 03E0188, the petition by Global Structured Finance Advisors in GP Renewals and Trading LLC, is over. Item 367, case 08E1014, the petition of Niagara Mohawk Power Corporation for approval of an energy efficiency portfolio standard, quote, Fast Track Utility Administered Electric Energy Efficiency Program, is over. Item 371, proceeding to examine the repowering alternatives appeal filed by Earth Justice, is over. And finally, item 665, the petition by Verizon New York, Inc. for certificate of confirmation for its franchise to the town and village of Harrison, Westchester County, is also over.
Okay, thank you. That just about does it, so we're done. Right? Bye. So, thank you. Before we get started on the agenda, I just wanted to make a couple of administrative announcements, which I'm actually quite delighted to make. Sitting with us today is Jalila Icy, who has just joined us as staff counsel or commission counsel. We'll be working with Kate and Elaine, and Jalila is an exceptional person we've had an opportunity to work with. She's previously was working as a fellow, I believe, with the governor's office, and just delighted to have her on staff. And then I'm also pleased to announce that Tom Condon, who many of you might know, who has been the Deputy Secretary for Energy for the Governor's Office, has agreed to come over and join us in a position as Deputy of Markets and Innovation, and where he will be working both overseeing as we think about REV and developing new markets, as well as clean energy and supporting that. Tom is coming, as many of you know, with a huge wealth of experience and has been a huge aid and help to us as we've navigated things, and I could not be happier that he finally consented to come get a real job and work with us. So we're really, really pleased to have Tom here. With that, we will get started. We're going to take things a little bit out of order. The first item for discussion is item 301, which is the petition of the Ginna Nuclear Power Plant requesting initiation of a proceeding to examine a proposal for continued operation. Alan Michaels, Assistant Counsel of the Office of General Counsel, will be presenting this. Hi, Alan.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, Commissioners. The matter before you this morning initiated from a petition filed by Ginna Nuclear Power Plant, LLC, which is the owner of a generation facility in Ontario, New York, approximately 20 miles northeast of Rochester. It produces 581 megawatts of electricity and is licensed to operate by the federal government until 2029. Until recently, Ginna has been under a purchase power agreement selling most of its electricity produced to RG&E. However, this agreement expired in June of 2014. Since then, the producer has been operating as a merchant generator. Within its petition, Ginna alleges that revenues are insufficient to cover its costs of operation. Therefore, Ginna seeks the following. 1, a finding that continued operation of the facility is necessary. 2, a determination that petition satisfies the notice requirements for a proposed retirement of a facility. And 3, that an order directing RG&E to negotiate and file a Reliability Support Services Agreement, or an RSSA, for continued operation of the Ginna facility. Due to the facility's economic situation in February of 2014, Ginna, RG&E, and the New York ISO entered into a reliability study agreement. And as a result of this agreement, in May 2014, the New York ISO produced such a study. The study found that the retirement of Ginna would result in the bulk transmission system and local distribution system reliability violations for 2015 and 2018, the 2 years that were studied. Two issues have arisen as a result of the petitioner's request. First, whether there is a reliability need for the continued operation of the facility. To consider an RSSA as a viable solution, Ginna must demonstrate that the facility must remain in operation to preserve electric system reliability. The New York ISO reliability study shows a need for 2015 and 2018, as we discussed. However, comments in opposition have been filed and contend that the study should review consecutive years. However, there are no such requirements. It must be recognized that the study was done in accordance with appropriate guidance and standards from NERC, NPCC, the New York Reliability Council, and the New York ISO. Additionally, the 2 years studied represent the expected bounds of a transmission project in the RG&E service area known as the Rochester Area Reliability Project, or the RARP, which, according to the study, is expected to be online in the fall of 2018. So to conclude need, a reliability study for the continued operation of the facility was found and by a proper study performed by the New York ISO. The second issue is notice. Ginna requests within its petition that its petition itself satisfies the requirements of a retirement notice of a generation facility. Opponents state that the petition does not satisfy the Commission's policies. Specifically, the Commission ordered that if permanent shutdown is planned due to economic reasons, a facility must provide written notice, and additionally, within 180 days of the time retirement is effectuated. Here the petition states that Ginna is contemplating retirement. In order to determine whether or not this petition satisfies the requirements of the Commission, we must look to the purpose of the Commission requirement policies. They state that the 180-day time period is utilized in order to find a reliability study, and second of all, to provide an opportunity to seek a solution, including alternatives, and plan accordingly. First, noting a reliability study, we already have one completed, and that study finds that there is a reliability need. Therefore, additional time is no longer required for a reliability study. Second, in reviewing alternatives, RG&E itself acknowledges that its own transmission alternatives that is currently reviewing will take time, specifically at more than 180 days to complete the RARP. Any other alternatives by third parties could have been proposed once the petition was filed. Additionally, RG&E has issued a request for proposals, an RFP, seeking alternatives, and responses are due in November 21st. Third, if the petition from July is accepted and no action is taken until January, 6 months have therefore passed. Therefore, the policies depicted in the generation retirement order have been furthered. Additionally, there are other factors justifying accepting the petition without a specific date of retirement. As a nuclear facility, there exist unique circumstances, both regulatory and practical. First, Ginna must comply with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission rules, which require Ginna to submit to the NRC written certification of a determination of retirement if a specific retirement notice is given. This would state that the power from the facility would permanently cease at a given date. Once NRC is noticed, NRC further requires decommissioning compliance, which would provide from Ginna the following to the NRC: cost estimates, plans, reports, and an assurance that funds are locked in an account for the sole purpose of decommissioning. Additionally, if noticed a specific date of retirement, Ginna could risk losing its employees. These people have specialized talents, not just within their fields, but also in relation to this specific Ginna plant. They are also in high demand. If a specific retirement were published, these employees could see it as a threat and may leave. Based upon the RFP, the time period from the date of the petition and the unique circumstances presented here, the spirit of the retirement policy has been satisfied. Lastly, the petition requests to have RG&E enter negotiations for an RSSA, noting that the retention of the facility is necessary for reliability. Gannett certifies revenues expected will not be sufficient to cover costs of operation, and further certifies that absent an RSSA, the facility would be retired as soon as practicable. Therefore, initiating negotiations may be an acceptable solution. Opponents maintain a concern for cost. It should be expected by the Commission that RG&E shall thoroughly investigate economic circumstance of Gannett to value the reliability of continued operation appropriately. Further, the Commission should expect RG&E to take changing economic circumstances and market prices into account during negotiations. Noting that there is an RFP outstanding, we may receive alternatives. If these alternatives are cost-effective, which may include generation, transmission, or other resources, and if they would be available in a timely fashion, they should be taken under consideration, and the negotiations should accommodate these alternatives. To conclude, a reliability need is demonstrated for the facility. The spirit of the retirement notice policies have been met in the unique circumstance of this facility. And lastly, the economic circumstances are sufficient to warrant initiation of negotiations for an RSSA, which will reveal the extent of Gannett's economic situation. Thank you, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Alan. Well, I was thinking about this. These kind of issues obviously present a very difficult situation for the Commission, and something that we've been talking about a lot in the last couple of weeks, it seems. But the challenge we have is this, and I'm appreciative of the way staff and the parties have dealt with it. This is a 581 megawatt nuclear power plant. If the plant retires, we have indication that the ability to maintain a secure power source to Rochester is going to be threatened. Obviously, the Commission has a great deal of concern with reliability, and when we develop our systems, our generation and transmission systems, they were developed as an integrated whole. And what we find is that some resources, such as Gannett, if they retire, compromise reliability locally, and therefore you need an alternative. It could be either another power plant, reduced demand, or new transmission. But without question, you can't simply take a plant of this size out of the system and expect to have no impact on reliability. So that and that's a concern for us. So we have this dilemma, because when the markets are working well, obviously nobody's here talking to us about how they really want us to stay away. We hear it a lot. Please stay away. But when the markets do not support plants, like Gannett is saying here, we are in the horns of a dilemma, because if we allow the plant to simply retire without an alternative, we're compromising reliability. And yet, because this is a market, we can't insist that they stay if they give us proper notice. So the issue for us is, how do we have an orderly exit? This was, in my mind, clearly an issue where you could put form over substance, but the result is the result we need, which is this. We understand, because it's nuclear power, there's a huge risk that if they announced a retirement, that we would have a loss of resources, and quite frankly, it's hard to find nuclear engineers to come work for a plant if they know the plant is going to be only operational for a short duration, and we have to worry about that. Secondly, we want to make certain that in evaluating whether or not we need the plant, we have sufficient time to look at alternatives. And I think the fact that we've had this since July, and there's going to be an opportunity to negotiate, and RG&E is doing an RFP, gives us ample time to take a look and see if there are viable alternatives in lieu of the power plant. And third, I think the other issue that we have going forward is we do fully expect RG&E to do a strong economic analysis of what the actual situation is of Gannett, and then also taking a look at what's the best price. And obviously this price, and looking at it, will come back to the Commission for review. So to my mind, we have a situation that, unfortunately, while none of us want to get involved in these agreements, we would prefer to have the market work the way it should. we have a concern about reliability. We can't have that kind of disruption, and we need to make certain that the alternatives that we're looking at to maintain reliability are at the least cost, least impact for consumers, and allow us to give us the greatest amount of option to pursue alternatives. So for that reason, while and I think, we have had 6 months. I think I appreciate the fact that Exelon came in and said, look, we've got a problem. Here's how we want to adjust it. I appreciate the fact that RG&E was able to say, look, we're going to have to look at alternatives and the work of the ISO. It just strikes me that the best thing for the state is that we look for a way to get the best agreement. If that agreement is necessary, we pursue the alternatives, and then we clearly come up with a plan to allow for an orderly retirement in terms of transmission or what other alternatives appear. So I am supportive of the position. I think it's a good outcome, not a great situation that we find ourselves in, but unfortunately with the low price of gas, it seems to be a situation we're in. So with that, I'm prepared to support the recommendation. Any further questions, comments?
As a commissioner living in the Rochester area, I'd like to say that I do wish Ginna well. Over the years, they've been a good citizen, a large taxpayer, a job creator, and a source of power without carbon or other emissions. But we need to look at all the alternatives, and this item will have us do that. In the long run, we will adopt the policy that will be the best choice for the ratepayers to ensure the reliability of power supply in the Rochester area, and I look forward to seeing the results of that study.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this issue. I think this is very important. It comes down to me to a couple of factors that make me very supportive of it. Ginna Nuclear Power Plant is an important asset in the state's generation fleet, and I think can positively contribute to our overall state grid reliability. So for me, the first prong is reliability, and I think it's important that we do what we need to do to ensure that and properly. The second is that looking at the generation retirement notice, I think it is properly satisfied, and I'm very comfortable with that, knowing that we have to factor in what the overall goal is. And then the third is fuel diversity. And I think it's an important, reliable, carbon-free energy that helps us in our energy resources. And looking at this, for me, the loss of jobs and economic growth is significant without this plant. And then the fourth is looking at the economic analysis that will be done after this, and I think that is very important and one that we really need to holistically look at in all of our analysis. And then I come down to other outside factors, Moody's, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, and the focus there on the real need of potential retirements of nuclear plants across the nation, and identifying what we need to do to ensure that we are properly taking care of our viable assets that we have, and not having significant loss in New York. So I'm very supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments? Just one thing, and Raj, you're here, and in case either one of you might want to comment, just for clarification. We do these reliability agreements, and they're really agreements if, in fact, a power plant can demonstrate that economically the market just doesn't support it. So, there is a threshold. It's not because they just feel like it. We have pretty rigorous on that. The second is that, and I think to Commissioner Sayers and Commissioner Berman's point, and I think we all feel this way, we reckon this plant employs, I believe, in the order of 700 people. It is an important part of the economy for the area, and also important part of the grid for all the reasons I think we've identified: fuel diversity, costs. So in looking at this RSS agreement, one of the potential outcomes could be that the market prices increase, and that after 2 or 3 years, there's a potential that the plant could find that economically it could survive without an agreement, and that's one of the things that we would look for. And as my expectation is that when we get this agreement, it will have what we've seen in other agreements as a form of a clawback, in which case, if in fact we find that there are revenues that exceeded what was expected, that there's a mechanism to pay them back to consumers who are therefore they're in the interim supporting a plant because the market is not supporting it. So, I think what we would like to see obviously is, one, that the amount of support that consumers are getting are the least amount necessary to keep the plant operational, and secondly, in recognition of the potential that the markets will come back and allow the plant to continue to be supported without a ratepayer support, there's a mechanism in the contract to allow for that, so that we are achieving what we need to do, is maintaining reliability at the lowest possible risk to consumers. And that's been sort of our standard, and I would expect that to be followed here.
Yes, just to give another context perspective, Commissioner, is that in the last decade, over 4,000 some megawatts have retired or filed for mothball notice. Of those, under 400 megawatts today is under RSS contract. So these are done very selectively, only if there's a reliability need. If not, the plant should be allowed to exit the market as the market rules require. And second, as you pointed out, we don't want to be in the situation heads you win, tails I lose from a consumer perspective. We want to make sure consumers are protected. So if the market prices do go up later, consumers should get the benefit of such increase in revenues for the generators. So there has been a precedent in the previous cases, so we expect that to be reflected in some way here as well as we move forward.
The other thing that I think I know, Raj, that staff is pursuing with the transmission owners and the New York ISO, which I think it would be good to get a briefing on at some point in the future, probably not in the next month, is that we are looking at doing more of an integrated at forward planning, and looking at where, in fact, we might have a need to build transmission to avoid these kind of situations in the future, where we see generators that are potentially at risk. We're not put in a position where we have to negotiate these contracts because we're worried about reliability on the market. And I think, trying to get ahead of these things as we think about it, obviously we're doing a lot on the demand side, will be important, because it would be, none of us, I know the utilities don't like it, we don't like it, I'm sure the generators aren't too happy about it either, is to have to negotiate under this kind of situation. So the more we can get ahead of that, it'll be good too.
Definitely. We'll come back to that. Study is underway.
Good. Great. With that, then, all those in favor of the recommendation to direct Rochester Gas and Electric Corporation and the Jucanay Nuclear Power Plant to negotiate a reliability support service agreement, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing no opposition, there being none, the recommendation is adopted. Thank you, Mr. Michaels. So the second item for discussion today is a staff report regarding the investigation of the September 2013 electric outage affecting the Metropolitan Transit Authority's Metro North Railroad New Haven line. Lekha Jonai is going to be presenting this today, and this is for a report only. There's no vote on it, but Lekha, please proceed.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Chair Zibelman and Commissioners. As I'm here this morning to, as Chair Zibelman just stated, I'm here this morning to brief you on staff's investigation of the September 25th, 2013 total power outage to a Metro North substation located in Mount Vernon, New York. On Wednesday, September 25th at 5:22 in the morning, a single Con Edison underground electric cable supplying power to 138,000 volts, or shorthand 138 kV, to a Metro-North Railroad substation located in Mount Vernon, New York, catastrophically failed. This failure crippled rail service to Metro-North's New Haven rail line, one of the busiest in our region, creating disruptions and hardship to the lives of over its 125,000 daily commuters for the next 12 days. So what did staff's investigation find? Metro-North owns, operates, and maintains an electric system on par with any utility system to provide service to its rail lines. In other words, it's a very sophisticated customer. It is not your typical Con Edison customer, but in fact is a utility-like electric system taking service from Con Edison. At the time of the failure, Metro-North was in the first phase of a two-phase major upgrade and rebuild of its Mount Vernon substation. This involved, among other things, relocating one of the two underground feeder cables that normally supply station power from Con Edison's transmission system. The feeder that was to be relocated is designated 38W10, and the one that was to remain in service is designated, conveniently enough, 38W09. These two cables run parallel to each other underground through the streets of Westchester County from Con Ed's transmission system and terminate eventually into Mount Vernon's substation. They're typically running through the streets on average about 18 inches apart. And each of these cables can independently supply all the electric needs of the station. This type of supply configuration is commonly referred to as an N-1 design, with N representing the number of supplies, in this case cables, and the -1 representing the number of these supplies or cables you can lose and still provide full electric service. To complete its work, Metro-North requested that Con Edison de-energize and remove cable 38W10 from service. Con Edison was also to perform certain aspects of the relocation work for Metro-North. This outage was initiated the evening of September 13th and was expected to take about 30 days to complete all this work. So, with one cable out of service, Metro-North substation now had what we'd call an N-0 design, meaning it would have no electric supply should the one cable fail or for some reason become unavailable. Now, just go to the next slide, please. Okay. The cables supplied Metro-North are an oil-filled pipe-type cable system. You may have gotten tired reading that in the staff's report or coming across that. So, anyway, this is a sample of what was actually taken out from that Metro-North station. This is obviously the pipe. This is obviously the cable, all three conductors bundled. This sits inside the pipe, and this is filled with oil, an oil-like product, and that oil-like product acts as a dielectric. In other words, it acts as an electric insulator such that the conductor, the copper portion inside there, does not come in contact with the steel pipe and to ground and fall. However, it's a system. The pressurized oil and the oil-impregnated paper surrounding the conductor act as a system. If the paper fails, it's compromised. If the oil is compromised, the potential for failure exists. So the two have to work together. Also, for these oil-filled pipe-type cables, it's been industry standard for decades to perform what's called a freeze operation. To perform a freeze operation to the pipe to solidify a portion of the oil to create a slug so as to minimize the amount of oil that needs to be drained from the pipe to perform repairs or modifications. So here on the slide, this is an example of a freeze pitch structure that's created to do this freeze operation. And essentially what's done is you have to excavate about an 8 by 10 or 12-foot wide hole and deep enough to get to the cables, unearth the cables, expose them, and you have to build this temporary cover so to keep the elements and for safety reasons. And then, next slide, Jeff. What's done at that point is that there's freeze apparatus installed on the pipe, okay? That you see that white stuff, that's a frozen pipe right there. And what they use is liquid nitrogen is slowly dripped in at a constant rate to ensure that that slug of oil does not become liquid at any point in time. Because once you cut into the pipe downstream, if that were to thaw, you run the risk of all that oil coming down the pipe and hurting somebody. This is done also because you don't want to drain all the oil from these pipe systems. You want to drain as little as possible. So setting up one of these freeze pit operations, a few things in consideration. Get as close as you can, but then you have to consider traffic, you have to consider residences and all that sorts of thing. So anyway, that's sort of what it would look like inside one of these pits during a freeze operation. In this instance, the freeze was initiated on September 14th to cable 38W10, and about 11 days later, on September 25th, the adjacent cable, the one that runs alongside it, 38W09, failed. It failed in a location near, but not adjacent to where the freeze operation was taking place on 38W10. So, for example, in this photo here, the pipe there to the right, which is the black thing, that's actually a gas line. That's not an electric line in this particular instance. So the expectation would have been that when the neighboring pipe failed, it would have been right adjacent or right alongside where you see the frosty part on the pipe. That would have been but that wasn't the case. The case was that the pipe actually failed in an unexcavated portion of soil that was not exposed. So it was unusual, obviously. I should say obviously, it was unusual. With the aid of... So then... The issue became what happened. With the aid of two forensic consultants, staff's investigation involved a deep analysis into the cause of the failure. The damaged section of cable and pipe was extracted from the freeze pit, and a strict protocol for handling this forensic evidence by the consultants was instituted to ensure the integrity of the investigation. Staff was present at the consultants' respective facilities during all important investigatory steps and tests performed by them. The forensic consultants concluded that a large section of bedrock located outside of the excavated freeze pit, just beneath the feeders and the surrounding soil, created a barrier that allowed water to pool and the subsequent freezing of the surrounding soil. So as the pipe was being frozen, the soil ahead of it was being frozen, and at the same time that was conducting heat away from the pipe that was in service, and therefore what happened was it caused the dielectric fluid in the neighboring pipe to solidify. So once that happened, the dielectric system had been compromised. It was just a matter of time before that failed, and when they failed catastrophically. After examining the physical evidence and observing and reviewing the consultants' analyses and tests, staff agrees with the consultants' conclusion regarding cause of cable failure. Because these pipes and cables were installed in 1977, the consultants were asked to evaluate whether the age of the pipe or cable contributed to the failure. Aside from visual evaluation, both the pipe and cable were subject to a number of industry-accepted engineering tests and evaluations. The conclusion was that neither the pipe or cable section showed any degradation due to age or environment. In fact, the condition of the cable was found to be typical of a new cable with a remaining life expectancy of more than 40 years. Knowing the cause of the failure, it became a matter of understanding whether proper freeze procedures by Con Edison employees were performed and whether Con Edison could have foreseen this occurrence and taken preemptive actions. As background, Con Edison has owned and operated and maintained these oil-filled pipe-type cables since the early 1940s. It currently owns, operates, and maintains about 624 miles of these types of cables in various voltage classes, but still 624 miles it is. Further, staff found that since 2001, Con Edison has performed, on average, about 18 of these freeze operations a year, and in its long history of performing freeze operations, it has never had an incident where an adjacent or nearby cable, as in this case, was damaged from one of its freeze operations. Staff reviewed Con Edison's engineering documentation governing freeze pit applications to determine if they were followed as required, and we conclude that they were followed as prescribed. Staff also investigated other utilities practices and other industry standards and found Con Edison's procedures in accordance with them. In the documentation we reviewed, there was no mention of a risk of a freeze operation potentially damaging or affecting a nearby feeder via a freezing of the soil surrounding the buried cable. Staff finds that the unique circumstances surrounding this freeze operation incident led to this failure, and that Con Edison could not have foreseen or predicted these events. This event is an example of lessons learned the hard way, and those lessons now need to be incorporated by Con Edison in its freeze operations procedures. As the report recommends, at a minimum, Con Edison needs to modify its procedures for these operations involving nearby cables, at a minimum, to monitor the temperature of the neighboring soils, monitor the temperature of the adjacent cable, provide explicit actions for its personnel to take in the event an unusual temperature drop is noted, and prior to initiating a freeze operation, it's supposed to evaluate the electric load characteristics of customers served by the cable for atypical patterns. What else did staff find? Following the failure, it became apparent very quickly that it would take weeks to repair the damaged cable, 38W09, and it would also take weeks to return the 38W10 to service from its outage state. With no source of electric power, it became a scramble of what to do. Con Edison and Metro North devised a plan to construct a temporary substation on a parking lot in Harrison, New York, and backfeed this section of track that was outage using Con Edison's distribution system, which operates at 13.8 kV, or 1/10 the voltage that Con Edison's transmission system operates. Doing this backfeed to Metro North also exposed the Con Edison's distribution system customers to risk. This construction activity took about 5 days to complete, and when completed, provided about 35% of rail service capability. In parallel, Metro North moved diesel-powered trains from its other lines to help move commuters through this 8.3 miles of electrically dead track. Also, Metro North moved a number of buses to shuttle commuters around this section of track. If I could just have that first image, Jeff, this is a point that I don't know if the Metro North line runs obviously from New Haven, Connecticut, and it terminates down in Grand Central Station, Manhattan. The section of track served by this particular substation is you see that rectangle. So electrically, the rest of the line was fine up to that rectangle, and beyond the rectangle was fine. So the key was, what do you do with the rail commuters to get them around that? So you have to sort of either drive a diesel train through there, which requires no electricity, or you have to put them on a bus and kind of get them to the next station. So that was sort of what was taking place. The rest of the New Haven line was not impacted electrically. Okay. Also, in parallel, Con Edison made the decision to expedite the work on the outage cable, as the damaged cable would take longer to repair, so that on Monday, October 7th now, New Haven commuter lines could experience full service again. Last, on October 19th, the damaged cable was returned to service, and returning the Mount Vernon substation to its normal electrical configuration with two 138 kV supplies. Prior to this extended outage, in its investigation, staff did not find any evidence that Metro North had developed a contingency plan of what to do to provide and maintain full rail service should the one remaining feeder fail or otherwise become unavailable. Staff found no written evidence from meeting notes, emails, and phone logs examined that a contingency plan was provided or produced. Con Edison was under the impression that the use of an electrical tie or connection to a neighboring Connecticut Metro North substation could be called upon to provide electric service, and along with diesel trains and buses, Metro North could maintain rail service to its customers. This impression was formed from previous outages affecting the Mount Vernon substation, where these steps were provided by Metro North sometime in the past to Con Edison. Unfortunately, staff learned that the electric tie to the neighboring Connecticut substation was not capable of providing meaningful electric service, and that diesel trains and buses are simply incapable of providing sufficient rail service to a line as busy as the New Haven line. Although in hindsight, Con Edison should have questioned Metro North about its contingency plan. As noted earlier, Metro North is a sophisticated electric system operator, and it knew the risks it was undertaking when it requested that Con Edison remove the one feeder, 38W10, from service to complete its substation upgrades. Also, during the investigation, staff became aware that Phase 2 of the substation rebuild was planned by Metro North for 2014, which would have required taking an extended outage of the other cable for a similar period of time, or about 30 days. Chair Zibelman, in a letter addressed to Con Edison President Ivey and dated December 10, 2013, directed Con Edison, absent an emergency, to not intentionally remove from service any supply cable to Metro North's Mount Vernon station before submitting a contingency plan jointly developed by Con Edison Metro North to maintain full service should both cables be unavailable. Further, staff was directed to review the plan for reasonableness and reply in writing to Con Edison Metro North that the plan is reasonable, and staff did that. The plan was filed on April 10th, 2014. On April 17th, both Con Edison and Metro North were notified by staff that it was a reasonable plan. And on April 13th, 2014, the cable was removed from service and the work completed without incident, and the cable returned to service on May 10th, 2014. The development of this contingency plan completes from the recommendations contained in staff's report. The report goes on to recommend that critical infrastructure customers, namely railroads, subways, airports, water supplies, and wastewater treatment facilities, should be given special consideration during planned maintenance outages due to the widespread public impact that can result if electric service is not available to them. In other words, prior to taking an outage of the electric supplies to one of these customers, a contingency plan needs to be in place. If the plan provides for less than 50% on normal service, the customer's senior management needs to affirm in writing that this is a satisfactory circumstance for its customers and the governmental agency that oversees or regulates its operations. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
First of all, I'm sure there are others involved, but thank you for your actually fantastic job, both on the investigation and trying to get to the root cause of these issues. It's my understanding that in addition to the fact that we went through and you were able to verify that Con Ed was not doing anything different, that was following operating procedures, that there's two things that I think are detailed in the report you didn't discuss today, but I think are important for everyone, for us all to recognize. One is Con Ed adhered to its standard procedures, and then secondarily, Con Ed is actually one of the most experienced utility in these types of freezing procedures, and we even went out to see if actually there are other utilities who had different procedures to see if maybe Con Ed should have been listening and learning from others, and in fact is considered one of the premier, and everything they're doing is consistent. So what was unusual about this, which I thought was fascinating, because it's sort of like one of those things you never know, is that because we're talking about Metro North load, and because Metro North load is just peaks during the morning and evening hours, it's not like normal electric load where during the time of the freeze there would be load on the other line that would continue to keep it heated. Is that was sort of an unexpected effect of the fact that you had a load on the line that its pattern was very unusual compared to most electric load that's continuous, and so that's why we were in a situation that while Con Ed adhered to everything it always done in the past, and we're not suggesting that's always good, but you learn from the past, and they never ran into this incident before, and in fact they'd worked on load for Metro North before, and this is the first time they ever ran into the situation where the load pattern and I guess the ground type of soil
all coupled together
to create this freezing effect that was absolutely unanticipated. So I think with that, and the fact that it adhered to procedures, and the fact that we looked out and saw that there was nobody else who was doing anything any differently, gave me sort of a lot of comfort to say that there's nothing to suggest for us that there was any violation of a regulation here. It is, as you said, one of those things that, lesson learned that from the incident itself, and then the question is, what do you do with that information? And I think the way, and just for the other commissioners, I think Raj is going to be sending a letter to all the utilities, is we never want to be in a position again where we have critical infrastructure and there's a planned outage and there isn't a contingency plan that's verified, validated, and understood by both the utility and the consumer. Because even though Metro North in this case was fully aware of the lack of a full contingency plan, Con Ed was not as, I would say, as cognizant of what the plans were. But the second is we didn't have a good discussion. Well, wait a minute. If we do have a second outage, what are we going to do? And I was very appreciative when we took the second outage in the spring. All those changes were put into place, the monitoring that Lekka talked about, and the contingency plan. So when we had the second outage, there was absolutely no effect. I mean, it worked. So with that, I think, I'm comfortable with the staff's really recommendation report that this really ends the matter for us. But I do note there is a second chapter here in that we are going to be imposing new standards on the utilities and learn from this, including Con Ed, but the other utilities too. So thank you, Lekka, and I know you spent some time in the freeze, but you look warm now.
I'm warm now.
So really quick, Chair, I just wanted to make a note that the report by staff is going to be put out for public comment pursuant to the State Administrative Procedure Act because it contains several recommendations, although already implemented. Staff will be coming back to the Commission asking the Commission to order the implementation so it has the full force and effect of enforcement. Second, that Raj did send out a letter on November 12th to all the other utilities asking them to identify comparable circumstances and to also put forward not only identification of those customers as well as the risk mitigation plans that should be put in place by the utilities. When those filings come back from the utilities, we'll discuss with staff whether or not they too should be put out for public comment that would then enable the Commission to order adoption of recommendations with respect to those other utilities, purely, again, not only for information, full disclosure, as well as for enforcement capability.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for clarification. Gary?
Lekka, thank you for the report, and I understand the uniqueness of the circumstance. I guess the one disconcerting part for us and for staff when they heard it was when they came up with a backup plan. Unfortunately, they came up with the backup plan after the outage occurred. Is that clear, what I heard?
Yes. Yes.
So they're really, at that point, they hadn't even considered a what-if scenario.
Well, I actually think there was a backup plan that Con Ed thought
they thought there was a backup
They thought there was.
There's an impression there.
Yeah, and I think that's what's perturbing.
So it's a lack of communications as much as lack of planning.
Right. It's like, kind of with your kids. Don't tell me you woulda, coulda. Just do it, right? And get it right the first time.
But the emergency plan they came up with was, for the lack of a better term, on the fly.
Junine said, yeah. I mean, there was no electric supply available, so what do you do? I mean, you can't move 125,000 people on this rail line without electric service. Trains and buses just don't cut it.
I think we're doing the right thing in trying to identify facilities that are essential and identifying a process that will ensure that this sort of thing doesn't occur. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, thank you. It was, I know that it was a very, it's a material impact, not the kind of lesson we want to learn. But I think that in the end, the staff recommendation, which as staff said, Kim said will be out for comment, shows that the biggest thing is that we need to make sure this doesn't happen again. And I think we have a plan in mind for that. Yes, Raj.
Just to add to your comment, I want to thank the staff team for an extraordinary job done on this. There's a lot of time spent learning and going through the details meticulously, diligently, and going to the consultant sites, forensic investigation, and observing. So it's a lot of effort spent both by our staff and Kim's staff, too. Thanks to the team.
The question is, did Kim go into the ice pit? No. So, go ahead.
I really appreciate the props. And, the visual, gives you a visual concept and understanding of actually what went on. And you said that they've been doing this for decades. I'm kind of wondering, is there, as an engineer, is there anything new coming down the pike on any of this that would change the freeze?
Well, not so much on the freeze aspect of it. What's becoming more accepted, at least by utilities who are naturally conservative by nature, is that getting away from using this oil as a dielectric in general. They're adopting cables that are what they call solid dielectric, and there would be no oil involved. So in that case, there'd be no freeze operations needed.
Yeah.
But
very good. Thank you so much.
Okay. Let's back to the next item then, and is item 402, and that's United Water New Rochelle, United Water Westchester petition for merger and request to increase rates, and that's going to be presented by Administrative Law Judge David Ort. And he's coming. And then we also have Joe Lochner, who is here to talk about and be available for questions regarding our ongoing investigation into United Water's accounting irregularities. So I think we'll start with David, right?
Yes.
And then I've asked, just so the other commissioners are aware, I've asked staff to, and Joe is here to answer questions. As you know, we have an ongoing investigation to some of the allegations concerning one of the officers at United Water, particularly as to whether or not there were accounting irregularities that may have affected rates and may be affecting the decision here. And I just thought it would be helpful as we're considering the application for the merger and the rate case that we also hear from Joe about this investigation and how the outcome of that investigation could affect us going forward. So with that, we'll just start with David and then move on to Joe.
Good morning, Chair Zillman and Commissioners. You have before you a draft order which recommends the adoption of terms that are contained in a joint proposal which was filed in the three pending cases involving United Water New Rochelle and United Water Westchester. One of the cases deals with the proposal to merge United Water Westchester into United Water New Rochelle. The other two cases seek an increase in combined annual revenues for the two companies of approximately $14.4 million, or about 23%. I'll describe briefly the procedural process that was followed because I think it illustrates that the issues were fully evaluated in the context of these proceedings. Subsequent to the filings having been made, the parties engaged in discovery. Staff and one intervener filed testimony and exhibits responding to the company's filings. The company thereafter filed rebuttal testimony and exhibits to the filings of staff and the intervener. In mid-May, the two companies, staff, municipal interveners, and the municipal consortium commenced settlement negotiations, which were continued on several dates thereafter. And I should point out that the municipal interveners is representation of the three municipalities that are served by the United Water Westchester system. The municipal consortium represents most of the municipalities that are served by the United Water New Rochelle system. Ultimately, the two companies, staff, and the municipal interveners reached an agreement which was embodied in a joint proposal that was signed and filed with the Commission Secretary on July 3rd. Subsequent to that, the parties filed statements either supporting or opposing the joint proposal, and reply statements were filed. We held two public statement hearings in this case. One was held in New Rochelle, another was held in Rye. We then followed it with an evidentiary hearing in mid-August. At that point, the two companies and staff sponsored a panel to answer questions with respect to the joint proposal, and the municipal consortium conducted cross-examination of those witnesses. Subsequent to that, we had additional briefs that were filed by the parties. I should note that with respect to the public statement hearings, we had 11 speakers. We also had 8 comments that were submitted to the Commission. The draft order addresses the issues that were raised in each of those comments. Now, turning to the joint proposal, and I'll address the merger first. The draft order recommends the authorization to merge United Water Westchester into United Water New Rochelle. As part of that, the order captures essentially $183,000 as merger synergies, and those are imputed synergies that would be used to reduce the first-year revenue requirement in the rate plan. I should point out that the synergies or the savings that are imputed in this order are more than 50% higher than any of the parties had projected or any of the parties had estimated. Excuse me. And the benefits that are identified from this merger are similar, very similar to benefits that the Commission found to serve the public interest in other mergers. Now, with respect to the rate plan, the order would establish a 3-year plan, which commences on November 1st of this year and runs through October 31st of 2017. In contrast to the $14.4 million that the companies had requested, which would essentially be for a 1-year case, the order would allow a total revenue increase of $10.2 million, which would be spread over the 3 years of the rate plan. Now, as we know, we are past November 1st, the start of the rate year. Because of that, the first-year rates would need to be compressed to allow the company to receive the revenues that it would have been entitled to under the rate plan. And what it does, it means that the bills for the customers would be slightly higher in the first year of this rate plan. Because United Water New Rochelle and United Water Westchester have costs, a number of costs, purchased water, for example, as well as other costs that are very, very substantial as well as unique to each system, the order would adopt separate rate districts for the two systems. The systems are not interconnected, by the way, and each of these systems would have standalone revenue requirements associated with them. I note that the vast majority of the increase would apply to the United Water New Rochelle system. As part of that, because the potential economic impact on the customers, the joint proposal had offered, and the order adopts, a levelized approach to those customer impacts to mitigate the impact on those customers. There would be no similar benefit to levelization for the United Water Westchester side of the system, so that is not being provided. And the company assures us that that would not provide any administrative problems to accomplishing levelization for one system and non-levelization for another. I should note with respect to the increases that the first-year rate drivers, of those first-year rate drivers, more than 90% is due to just 3 cost drivers: property taxes, purchased water, and rate-based additions. Now, the property tax allowance in the draft order reflects adjustments to capture the benefits of economic obsolescence awards. The company didn't receive awards, but the parties have adjusted for that, as well as backed off or removed the sewer and garbage tax assessments on mass assets. Despite the fact that no refunds have been received, the parties have captured that, as I said. The company would be required to report annually with respect to its efforts to control its property tax expenses. And the property tax reconciliation mechanism that is included in this order actually is an improvement over what was contained in the rate plans for these two companies prior years. Herein, the company would be paying for 20% of the increase in property tax expenses over the annual targets. Now, purchased water is one of the, as I mentioned, one of the highest costs for these systems. Each of the systems purchase, each of the systems purchase 100% of their water from outside sources. They're different sources, but they purchase it. And to kind of give you a sense of the import of these costs to these systems, the purchased water expenses for United Water New Rochelle accounts for 50% of its operations and maintenance expenses, and 70% of the operation and maintenance expenses for United Water Westchester. With that in mind, the order allows the companies to recover the incremental cost for purchased water increases, and that's consistent with prior rate orders. Now, the last item that I had mentioned, and there are the three cost drivers, is the rate-based additions. And in this regard, I should note that a significant portion of the rate-based additions are due to the underground infrastructure renewal programs that each of these companies have. New Rochelle's is referred to as the long-term main renewal project. Westchester's is referred to the underground infrastructure renewal project. And the order increases the spending for each of these programs in each of the years. One of the benefits of the replacement of these, or the renewal of these programs, which applies to the mains and services, is that the non-revenue water, which is a major issue in these cases, it should assist in reducing those levels. And I should also point out that in the event the company doesn't spend the allowances that they're given for either of these systems, those amounts will be captured for ratepayers' benefits in the future. As I noted with respect to the non-revenue water, I should step back for a moment and just point out that the company typically has to report pursuant to Commission's regs on annual non-revenue water levels and what steps it's taking to reduce those levels. The order has a provision in it that requires additional reporting, and essentially what it is doing is requiring the company to provide more detailed breakdown of the reporting for the type of water that is considered non-revenue. It may be leakage, it may be unauthorized use, thefts, for instance, or it may be authorized use for the fire department, things like that, but it's still non-revenue water. And those sort of things the company is going to be reporting on. The order would adopt the joint proposals, 47% equity ratio, and the 9.2% return on equity, as well as a two-tiered sharing threshold for excess earnings. Those, again, are improvements over the prior plans that for both of these systems. You've all probably dealt with it or recall that we've had proposals or the recommendations to shift fire service, the public fire service charges from the municipalities to the other customers that are served. This is the first case, the first rate case, where those issues have been brought in. Obviously, that is with respect to the legislation that was adopted last year. The rate design for these cases adopts that shift in the public fire service rates. One of the things that this case also has is notes is that the company is going to provide an additional cost of service study or a new cost of service study for its next rate case. And one of the things it's going to do is review the fire service rates just to ensure that they remain reasonable. There are a number of other joint proposal provisions, and I'm not going to go into all of them. I'll just touch upon a couple of them. But they are designed to focus the company's attention on controlling its costs, and improving service, and reporting the results of its efforts in that regard. One of the issues that we dealt with it in the United Water New York case, is the company's audit of its M&S charges, management and service charges. And for these cases here, the companies will be coordinating with United Water on the comprehensive audit that is being conducted, and the companies will adopt any recommendations that the Commission may order, unless, of course, there's a stay granted with respect to the implementation in the United Water New York case. This case, again, similar to the recent case in United Water New York, adopts a customer service performance mechanism. For these companies, it's the first time it's being done. And what it will do, it will be aligned with tracking and assigning a negative revenue adjustment in the event that the company fails to meet certain performance metrics with respect to the escalated PSC complaints. I think simply to conclude is that The draft order, as I'm sure you've reviewed and have read, fairly balances the interests of both the company and its ratepayers. It provides the company with sufficient revenues, and I think that they can provide safe and adequate service as a result. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Unless someone has a burning issue, what I'd like to do is just give Joe an opportunity to update us on the investigation, and then we'll open it for comments. So go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. This is reporting on the termination of Michael Pointing and two related employees. On September 12, 2014, Michael Pointing, the general manager of the New York division of United Water, was terminated by the company. According to the company, Mr. Pointing was responsible for the operations and financial performance of the company's New York business units, which include United Water New York, Westchester, New Rochelle, and Owego Nichols. Also terminated were a director of finance and a manager of utility accounting. This employment action was reported in the Rockland County Times blog on September 17, 2014. The article cited an unidentified source as stating that an internal investigation into the alleged misappropriation of funds and a misstatement of revenues by Mr. Pointing was underway. Beginning in October 10 of 2014, various parties in the various open proceedings that are before you with regard to United Water New York today, and also the recently completed United Water New York rate filing, case 13W0295, have filed motions and filings before the Commission, requesting, citing the blog entry at Rockland County Times and the alleged misappropriation of funds. And on that basis, they ask for present a number of requests. Among them is the setting of all the New York utilities rates, 20% temporary rates by the Commission, establishing a prudence proceeding and investigation. It also includes reversing or reducing significantly United Water New York's recent rate increase. They also want to require that in this investigation proceeding that should be established that the three former employees be compelled to testify and be subpoenaed in the matter. The company responded to these requests in its filings, also in these proceedings to the Commission, and they disagree. They believe that the filings are relying on unattributed media speculation and innuendo, that they are not maintained of substantive merit, and are not based on record evidence, and that they don't demonstrate that the alleged events meet the standards governing the request for temporary rates. They also state in their filings that based on their internal investigation, they found no evidence of funds being misappropriated. Staff began its investigation towards the end of September. We had meetings with the companies. We also issued two sets of interrogatories composed of 21 questions. And to keep this open and so people are aware of what's going on, the public, we established a matter number on our website, informed parties of the matter number, 14-02068, and placed in that location for public viewing all the interrogatories and the responses that we have received to date. And by the way, we'll be asking additional interrogatories, and they will be there. Okay. What do we know today? Well, we know in the responses that the company states that employees that were terminated were not terminated for misappropriation of funds. The company acknowledges, however, that there has been an overstatement of revenues at its New York United Water utilities of approximately $7.1 million. This accounting error occurred due to the company's improperly booking a higher level of revenues resulting from the operation of their revenue reconciliation tariffs than what was filed for and approved for recovery by these parties before the Commission under these tariffs. This accounting error began in 2010 and carried forward until discovered by the company in July of 2014 when it prepared its final revenue reconciliation filing for United Water New York under case 09W0731. Just to understand this, the way these reconciliations work is under the rate plan, United Water New York is provided a revenue reconciliation mechanism that allows the company ultimately to recover its projected level of meter sales for a full rate year. We call them the targeted revenues. What happens is at the end of every rate year, the company makes a filing. They compare their actual meter revenues with the target revenues. The difference, they are then allowed to establish a rate, a surcharge or surcredit rate, to recover the difference in the next period. Separately, however, the company, during the rate year, while these sales are being made, has to monthly record an estimate of the revenues it expects it will file for at the end of the rate year under the tariff, under the reconciliation tariff. This is what caused the accounting error. Basically, the accounting error was caused by when the company spread the annual level of targeted revenues in its monthly accounting. It spread it differently to the months for the rate year than was reflected or allowed under the revenue reconciliation mechanism. Now, this difference would have no problem. There would be no error for 12-month periods because the total amount of target revenues in the monthly accounting for an annual period is the same as in the reconciliation mechanism. So for the first rate years under the United Water New York rate plans, there was no impact. However, the last filing was only 9 months. It was for the 9 months ending May of 2014. And in that situation, however, the revenue reconciliation filing recognized a target level revenues or allowed revenues of only $40.2 million. The company, meanwhile, in its monthly accounting, assumed that they would receive revenues of $47.3 million. Thereby, they booked $7.1 million greater revenues than was ultimately allowed for recovery under the reconciliation mechanism for this period. United Water stated in its responses that this was the result of a failure to follow proper accounting principles. However, they conclude that the employees were not attempting to intentionally manipulate financial results and were not engaged in efforts to deceive the company. United Water acknowledges that these employees, as a result of this error, received $2,000 of additional incentive pay or bonus pay. However, it is important to point out that the Commission in setting rates, both in this proceeding, that we're see before us for a rate increase, but also United Water New York, Owego, Nichols, and Westchester, do not allow recovery of incentive or bonus pay. So ratepayers could not be harmed by that. Okay. The company stated in its responses that they don't believe that the customers were harmed in the reconciliation filings as we just discussed. They also believe that the current concluded rate proceedings did not reflect these higher revenues in any shape or form to project the revenues into those rate years. So they don't see any impact. They don't see any harm. At the same time, after discussions with the company staff, having discussions with the company has decided, United Water has requested that PricewaterhouseCoopers, an outside auditing firm, examine the revenue reconciliation and revenue accounting processes of the company going back to 2003 to determine if these accounting errors occurred before 2010 and if rates were impacted in any way. We also discussed with the company a need to expand this examination, and the company has requested that PwC perform an expanded review of the conduct of these terminated employees to test other areas where these people could potentially have affected the results of the company to make sure ratepayers were not harmed. This will involve gaining an understanding of the relevant internal controls in those areas that the employees had influence and processes, and testing sample transactions to see if there was a negative impact on ratepayers. Again, the company has promised that the cost for the PwC audits will not be charged to ratepayers and will be absorbed by the shareholders. Now, very simply, staff is in the preliminary stages of this investigation. There's work still to be done. Staff has obtained the internal accounting reports and the company's statements, but we still need to verify all these statements back to the actual records. We need to fully verify the statements with regards to the reconciliation filing back to the actual filings of underlying work papers. We also have to go back and really examine how this accounting figured into the earnings sharing mechanism reports that were filed by the company during these time periods, and also if the accounting information was in any way or shape or form used in projecting revenues for revenue requirements in any set of rates that the company has been allowed, that these companies have been allowed. However, our initial evaluation to this point is that we don't believe that ratepayers have been harmed. We don't believe that ratepayers have been harmed in the United Water New York revenue reconciliation mechanism because it properly reflected the recovery of $40.2 million of revenues for the 9-month period and not the incorrectly booked $47.3 million. The ratepayers did not pay for that $7.1 million that was improperly booked on the company's records. Other important point, too, is that although we haven't traced this down to ground, if the earnings sharing reports that they've made, United Water New York made, reflected this higher level revenues, this would only inflate earnings that would be subject to sharing. So we don't think there would be alarm there. And so we have to trace these things through, but we really at this point don't have any clear, convincing evidence of harm. Now, we recommend that we be able to complete our investigation, and that we also believe that we would like to look at the PwC reports, audit reports, when they're completed. We will monitor the work, and when the reports are issued by PwC, we will review the reports plus the underlying work papers and ask questions where we feel it's necessary to get a full story. We hope that we've been told in interrogatory responses from the company that they should have this completed by the end of the first quarter of this next year. And we will report back to you after we complete our investigation and determine what action to take. But at this time, we believe that temporary rates are not appropriate.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I appreciate that, and I think that, if I recall, there's not actually a motion in this particular case. It's in other cases that we're getting petitions. Is that right? I saw a note from the Chief Judge this morning to that effect. Maybe, David, you want to respond?
There is in other cases. There was also a supplemental brief that was filed in the ongoing rate cases, the New Rochelle and Westchester cases. That brief was untimely, and it was basically based on the probably shouldn't even say that. It was predicated on the newspaper article only. It was an early brief that was filed. It's not addressed as part of the order because of this other investigation that's going on.
Okay. So
there are other ones in the other.
Thank you. So I guess two observations, and one is that in the event the completion of the investigation does reveal some irregularity that impacted rates, we do have a prospective remedies that we can put into place so the fact that we decide not to put in temporary rates on this rate case does not prevent the Commission from doing a forward adjustment on rates. I assume that's right, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So with that, my view is that number one, in this instance, I did get a call from the company, but I think it's really important when these things are discovered that we get the notice immediately. I appreciate the fact that the staff has started the investigation, that we're going to have an independent accounting firm take a look at it, and that all indications that if there was any adverse effect, it was probably on the earnings side as opposed to the rate-making side. So I'm very comfortable then in moving forward and ruling on the pending joint proposal on the rate case. And in terms of that, seems like ages ago since you talked to us about it, David. I don't have any questions. I think that like most joint proposals, when we see them, we had many different parties involved in this with different economic interest. I'm very appreciative of the work that they did. I think we've imposed some conditions moving forward that are consistent with what we've done otherwise in other cases to help protect consumers. Certainly in the areas of looking at ways for conservation, that sort of remains an important part for all water companies. But in this instance, too, I think that having the 3-year rate plan and the moderating effect of that's important. It is concerning, I think, for me, and I expect the other commissioners, too. When we have the situation where we're having these significant rate increases associated with both taxes and purchase of water that are really, in a way, non-controllable expenses, and it makes it even harder for us as we're trying to maintain the price of water to address it. And it's a continuous dilemma, but under, obviously, our statutory obligation, we have an obligation to allow for the company to recover its legitimate costs of providing service, which include taxes and in this case, purchase of water, and as well as investments that they're making, that they have to make. So while I think none of us like to see rate increases of this type, I appreciate the work done by the staff, the parties, the company, in looking for ways to moderate it, and I intend to vote in favor of it. So with that, I'll open it to any other questions or comments. No? You have no feelings about this, right?
Oh, well, let's not even go there. We'll be sitting here for the rest of the day. Dave, I wonder if you could just briefly explain that when you have a merger like this and you have one company here, the other one down here, we're trying to bring them together, we're doing a 3-year rate case, when do you actually see where there will be that flat line between the two companies?
I couldn't predict when that would occur. Usually it's based upon when the companies have costs that start equalizing between the two systems. I could give you an example here. Westchester's costs are lower than New Rochelle's. New Rochelle, in the last case, which had a large hit, was due primarily to the Delaware Interconnection project, which was coming online, and that accounted for, I think, 75% of their increase in the last case. On the Westchester side of the system, they could foresee a project coming into existence somewhere down the road, and it's referred to as Rye Lake. There's certain requirements that I believe this one was for filtration, and they're exploring options as to whether or not United Water Westchester could use that as a system, either by itself or in conjunction with the Westchester Joint Waterworks. If that happens, the filtration of that, the cost for filtration would have to be recovered from the customers, which includes United Water Westchester, increasing their costs. So basically what it is we bring their costs up closer to where United Water New Rochelle is.
Okay. And maybe, Kim, and you can put it in such wonderful terms, if you could explain so that it is on the record how the new state law affects what we're talking about with regard to fire hydrants. Yes.
Our favorite statute.
Yeah. So the certain areas of the state, 'cause it's not throughout the entire state, we're able to pass legislation that the governor signed that allows a municipality, after certain procedures are accommodated, including notice requirements, a resolution, a vote, to basically shift the cost of fire hydrants out of the municipal budget to the general body of ratepayers. And we've had a number of cases that have come before the commission because the commission was also included as far as taking some action, and I hate to say this, it was a purely administrative action on your part in accepting the filing by the municipality in requesting this move of the cost of the hydrant service over to the general body of ratepayers. So you didn't have a choice of really saying yes or no, as long as the administrative process laid out in the statute was followed. Again, it was an administrative act on your part. As David mentioned, this is one of the first times now we're seeing the impact of those requests, the law, subsequent requests, being brought into a rate-setting process. Did I say anything wrong, David?
No, you didn't. The only thing that I'd probably add to that is that one of the things that the law also provides is essentially that the municipality that achieves this change is expected in the next year to back those costs out of its budget. So therefore, at some point, the ratepayers or the customers, residents, will see some sort of benefit. What the criticism that we heard at the public statement hearing is, what the residents also lose is they lose the tax write-off. When it was charged to them in their property taxes, they were writing those off on their income taxes.
Is there a mechanism where communities opt out of this?
Well, it essentially is they apply for it. That's a good question. You mean to reverse what they've already done?
No, I don't.
Communities can choose not to.
Right, they can. In fact, we have, I think, a few, I don't know, Bruce, maybe a couple, that have not opted in at this point after following, again, that procedure. But Bruce has all the charts on this one.
There's approximately 3 communities in the New Rochelle territory that have not opted into this law as yet.
So there again, how is that balance achieved?
Is that a rhetorical question?
I hate to say it.
I mean, isn't it? I mean, what we in this rate order, it's very complex.
So complex.
That some rates reflect it, some don't, and we just need to adjust it. I understand the company feels that it can do that. Reflect how the pass-through is, but it is complex.
And Joe, when do you expect that this investigation will be thoroughly vetted and complete?
Well, we hope that the company, in a supplemental response to question 12 of the second set of interrogatories, said they expect to have the PwC audits, the Pricewaterhouse audit reports, completed in 3 months. Mm-hmm. And of course, we want to get monthly status reports from them on the progress of the work. I would think when we get those reports, we'll immediately want to look at the reports, but also the underlying work papers. That'll probably take about a month. So, we need a little time to look at what they produce and to have meetings with the company and the outside auditors. In the meantime, we're going to be doing our own work also on information that's been reported to us, and we have access to books and records. So I think it's probably, I would say, 3 to 4 months we'll have a good idea what the full story is.
Okay. Just another question to follow up on that. I mean, we're doing a rate case. The company has other companies in New York, United Water, and I'm kind of wondering how this investigation and having their own investigation, how that affects the market. The market looks at this with regard to if they're going out and they want to borrow money for capital projects. Will this be something that will hurt the company and then follow through hurting ratepayers?
Well, I think that by investigating to first develop solid evidence to take action is a reasonable approach. I think that the market has to accept that. You have to deal with the facts. And so I don't see it as being a harm to the companies and their credit rating in that respect.
Yeah.
There's no way we can avoid it.
Okay, thank you.
I would anticipate, though, and it's normal in these situations, to the extent there are accounting irregularities, it's going to be picked up also by the company's regular auditors, and they'll have to be looking at controls moving forward to see if their controls are sufficient, and that's going to be of interest to us as well. So, and the question is if they see this as a one-time offense or a failure of the controls, and I'm going to guess that's going to come out of the audit.
And by the way, they had to restate their earnings and file restated financial statements under their credit agreements, under their various loan agreements with their creditors because of this.
So, but to Commissioner Akinpor's point, one of the things that we can ask the staff to do, and I'll ask them now, is when we come back, even with respect to, understanding the impact on rates, is to understand if there's any impact on the financing costs of the company that we should also be considering moving forward that are related to this incident as opposed to anything else.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other further comments? Okay. With that, are everyone prepared then to proceed? Well, then, all those in favor of the recommendation to adopt the joint proposal with the modification noted in the order and approve the merger of United Water Westchester into United Water New Rochelle, as well as establish a 3-year rate plan, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There being no opposition, the recommendation is adopted. So thank you, Mr. Ort and Mr. Walkner. Is everyone okay to proceed? Okay. And we will move on to the next item.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I'm presenting this item today on behalf of the advisory staff team that reviewed and analyzed the record in this case.
Okay, so just so everyone knows, this is Ashley Marino, and she's the administrative law judge, and we're talking about the United Water's development of a long-term water supply. It's item number 403.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
She has other things she has to get on with in her life, so we need to do this fast.
This is true.
You're upset.
This case was initiated in July of 2013 to assess the need for a significant new water supply source in United Water New York's service territory. United Water has proposed to resolve its water supply concerns by utilizing the Hudson River as a new source of water supply. To do that, United Water would have to construct a desalination plant to make the water usable for drinking. United Water has proposed constructing such a plant, known as the Haverstraw Project, in 3 separate phases. It currently has permits pending before the Department of Environmental Conservation for this project. There's significant public opposition, both from public officials and from the general public, with regards to using the Hudson River as a supply source. At the beginning of this case, United Water was instructed by the Commission to file a report with recent information regarding projected demand for a new water supply source. Public statement hearings and a public comment period were established to allow for the public to comment on United Water's report and the need for a new water supply source. The public statement hearings were held in October 1st and 2nd of 2013 before Administrative Law Judge Kevin Casuto, and they were extremely well attended and continuing to the early morning hours. Between the 2 days of the public statement hearings, approximately 100 people spoke on the record. Department of Public Service staff later submitted a report on need and found that although the need for a long-term water supply source was delayed from what was originally forecasted, it did confirm that there is a need for a new water supply source. And staff in its report also made a variety of other recommendations. A schedule was set for parties to provide initial and reply comments to the staff report, and the Secretary also invited parties to make prima facie cases of imprudence with regards to United Water's actions relating to its proposed water supply source. Since this proceeding was initiated, over 1,500 comments have been received. The majority of the comments voiced opposition to a long-term water supply source, and more specifically to the Haverstraw project. The comments are summarized in the order in the draft item you have before you. There's two questions before you today. The first is whether there's a need for a long-term water supply source in United Water's service territory. And the second question is whether it is appropriate at this time to open a proceeding to review whether United Water's pursuit of the Haverstraw project was prudent. As to the first question, it's recommended that the Commission find that that immediate need for a new supply source is delayed, but there remains a real likelihood that need for an additional long-term water supply source exists, and that there may be a need for additional water supply by 2020. However, we found and recommend that there's a small window of opportunity to explore alternatives to determine whether significant conservation measures and or supply alternatives can be identified and executed to ensure adequate water supply for United Water customers. It's therefore recommended that United Water conduct two separate studies and report back to the Commission with its analysis in 6 months. The first study should examine what conservation opportunities exist, and we suggest that they do so in collaboration with the Rockland County Joint Task Force on Water Management. And the second study should examine the feasibility of developing additional smaller-scale supply alternatives. In addition, it's recommended that United Water submit quarterly reports to the Commission commencing in January, describing actual water usage and supply levels so that if the reserve between supply and demand becomes too narrow, the Commission can be poised to act to ensure safe and reliable water service to United Water customers. It's also important to note that in exploring the alternatives, it's recommended that the Commission receive input as well from the community and its representatives as well. And the draft order would urge that the Rockland County Joint Task Force on Water Management report to the Commission within 6 months of its plans for adopting feasible conservation options and explain the demand reductions associated with those measures. The second question before you today is with regards to prudence. It's recommended that based on the information that was available at the time, that you find that United Water was reasonable in its pursuit of a water supply solution, given the facts, and that no prudence proceeding be initiated at this time. Just as a reminder, United Water was pursuing the Haverstraw project, the long-term water supply source, in furtherance of the Commission order. And while the Commission in this draft order is reviewing new circumstances and exploring alternatives, that does not change the circumstances at the time that they began pursuing this project, and it does not justify a prudence proceeding. With that, that's the conclusion of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Ashley. And actually for the other staff that's worked on this, I know Mr. McGowan and Mr. Alch were also heavily involved in this. This has clearly been a long time proceeding in front of the Commission that's raised a lot of concerns, and certainly we've had an opportunity to meet with not only the members of the community who have come here and have expressed their concern about how do we move this forward, as well as other parties to this case. the way I look at this issue is that the Commission has an obligation to make sure that the water is available for the community and it's safe. This is both a health and safety issue, particularly when we're talking about drinking water, that we always are concerned about. The situation we're in is that from the forecasts that have been developed and looked at over the next 5 to 15 years or 3 to 15 years, is that there's folks who are saying, hey, this may not materialize for 10 or 15 years. On the other hand, we have a forecast that staff has prepared that's consistent and looks at all the factors that the Commission considers, which is what's the current level of demand, where's the economic growth in the community, what's happening in terms of the economy at large, what's the current water situation, to see if and at what period the community might be at risk in having insufficient water. And the concern we have is, in any situation, is that because we're relying on matters that are both within the company's control and matters that are exogenous to the company's control, we can't necessarily predict when that need may arise with the certainty that we could say, hey, on this date in 2026 we're going to need water. Until that point, we're okay. It could be as early as 2020. It could be later. So I see this as a bounding issue. The question is that are we doing everything we can to delay that effort, and what are the things or tools that we have to be able to do that, and to make sure that we're looking at conservation, that we're looking at leakage, we're looking at sort of everything we can to delay that effect, as well as maybe other municipal controls that could be placed in place, as well as rate design issues. So what I see here is a great window of opportunity, and I'm very pleased to see that the community's already engaged to start working with the company. And we're asking the company to, not dust off the old plans, but actually put in new plans, bring in some new thinking as to what else we can do. And I would ask that staff get engaged in this as well, because it's something we can't afford to lose sight of. We need to be thinking, what are the plans, and we can start trying things. So there is an element, I believe, of urgency that we need to stop fighting and sort of start getting on with it. Let's start looking for solutions. Bring things back to the Commission. Don't feel a need to hesitate and say, well, let's wait for 6 months. If something comes forward and comes out in 2 months, 3 months that we should start implementing, we'll do that. I think, hopefully we can turn what has been a highly contentious and difficult issue for the community, certainly for the company and for the Commission, to, I don't want to sound too Pollyannish about it, but if we can find the right types of solution, the right types of programs that lead to much more aggressive conservation and reducing of leakage and I can't remember the acronym, but water that sort of isn't used, that's great. Maybe this can become the profile that we want to achieve, as opposed to the thing that everyone's sort of anxious about. But I think the most important thing, and the message I hope people will see in our order, is that we can't simply say, well, supply will never be needed, so therefore let's just go home. We have to plan for the worst and hope that doesn't happen, but we have to plan and we need to take action so that we're in a position that we're not compromising health and safety and are ahead of the game. So that's one big piece of it. So and it is bounded. The other, I think, on the issue of prudence. It is clear to me in looking at the record, looking at the orders of this commission, looking at the determinations that were made at the time, which were based on the evidence at the time and the information, that the company pursued the desal plant with the good faith because it was directed to do so by the commission. So while we're going to be taking up the issue of the surcharge in the next proceeding, I'm also comfortable in saying that to suggest that there was imprudence on the part of the company into developing the desal would be inappropriate. And one of the things that we heard last week, and I think is very important, is that we provide confidence in our processes, and the fact that we have a new commission sitting here today that's different than the commission there our scrutiny is not what we think today, but what was important then, what were the facts then, and what was and therefore were the decisions then. What did the company do based on what they heard and what we directed? And in that context, I think the record's pretty clear that the decision to move forward with the desal plant was very consistent with the Commission was contemplating would happen, or move forward with the design and the permitting. So I don't think that there's any basis to find imprudence on that. So with that, I am prepared to vote in favor of instructing the company to not pursue the desal plant at this time, to start working with the community. Let's look for alternatives. Let's keep our eyes on the ball. Let's come up with some creative ideas, and let's solve what has been a very, very challenging and emotionally charged atmosphere in this community.
Yeah, I just want to build quickly on your points there. I could be much more accurate predicting the winner of the Super Bowl in 2007 than I am going to be in 2021. It's much easier once you know what happens to go back and say, that's what we should have done 8 years ago. But you don't know everything that's going to happen. You don't know how the world changes. And determinations were made in good faith, including some supporters locally who later, just as we're looking at this, saying maybe we better change directions to some degree, because those were the facts at hand at the time. And we made determinations. We, as the Collective Public Service Commission, probably 5 different people sitting up here at that point, made determinations at that time. Going backward, you can see what might have been done differently. To me, that's not imprudence. That's flexibility. That's learning. I'm glad we're flexible. We didn't get tied into this is the determination we made in 2005, and we have to stick with it forevermore. And so that's where we're at today. So I want to go forward. It does very little good to sit and discuss what might have happened 8 years ago. So I think we're doing the right thing here, and I just wanted to kind of emphasize and reinforce what you said. Let's have the community and the company work together to try to maintain a safe and adequate water supply in changing times. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good history lesson, Gary. And that's the one thing that the Commission and any commission that sits up here has to remember, that favorite word of mine, flexibility. And I think thanks to the chair and her direction to the staff, we are doing just that. We've listened to the people. Those public statement hearings were extremely important. And I think that we do have an opportunity to work everyone together, not just pointing fingers at each other, but to come up with a reasonable solution to look at this, but to remain mindful that we need to have a good working plan for the future. We just don't want to push everything off, and then all of a sudden someday when some of us won't be sitting here, all of a sudden the sky is falling and there's no plan to address what happens. So I think we have, there are some wonderful people who spoke at the public statement hearings. They're knowledgeable. I think the company will now be open to listening and working with all of them, and I think for the benefit of the people in the area who will be affected, that this is probably the best outcome that we can support.
Thank you. Commissioner, sir.
I agree with the comments of the chair and my fellow commissioners. I recognize the community's deep concerns about the desal plant, and I heard those concerns loud and clear at those public statement hearings that ran until well after midnight. We're in luck here because we have some breathing room to see if conservation or other resources or structural changes in demand or any other factors that affect supply or demand in the future can either further postpone or completely eliminate the need for this plant. But as regulators, we cannot allow Rockland County to slide into a situation where it runs out of safe water. If more supply is required, we need to get it into place in time to meet the need. So in this window of breathing room and opportunity, I also urge the county, the municipalities, citizens groups, staff, and all other stakeholders, along with the company, to come up with something that works. But please recognize that when this comes up before us again, we are going to have to be reasonably conservative in forecasting and planning so that we don't put the water supply at unacceptable risk.
Thank you. Commissioner Berman?
Thanks. I think what everyone said is very important, and I don't think I really have anything substantively to add, except that I am going to be looking at what happens next, and I think it's important that folks come prepared to roll up their sleeves and figure out some solutions. So I'm looking forward to what I hope is a solution that works for the community and New York as a whole. Thanks.
Thank you. So, looking forward to hearing how this proceeds. I know that the Rockland County Task Force is already engaged. I think that's a great thing. I know that the folks there are really looking for alternatives. I don't think anyone either in that community wants to put the people in that community at risk for not having adequate and safe drinking water. And what's so important, I think, is as Commissioner Brown and my fellow commissioners said, is let's get on with it, let's move forward and find a better solution. So with that, all those in favor of the recommendation to find that the need for the major long-term water supply is delayed, but with the recognition that there is going to be a long-term need and we need to look at alternatives, as well as the recommendations with respect to prudence, please indicate by saying aye. All those opposed? Hearing no opposition, the recommendation is adopted. So thank you. The fifth item for our discussion today is then also a related case, and it concerns the petition of United Water for implementation of a long-term water surcharge presented by Judge Cassuto. And thank you, Judge Marino. Welcome, Kevin.
Good afternoon, Chair Zeibelman and Commissioners. In June 2013, United Water New York filed a petition for a surcharge to collect carrying costs on its development of a new long-term water supply source. Excuse me. The company identified $52.1 million of actual project costs through March 31st, 2013, and later updated its costs through December 31st, 2013. However, only the costs through March 31st were litigated. Under the Commission's Uniform System of Accounts, or USOA, carrying costs are identified as allowance for funds used during construction, or AFUDC. If the surcharge were granted, the AFUDC amount calculated annually would be approximately $6 million in the first year of the surcharge. The case was fully litigated. 5 days of hearings were held in May of 2014. Many parties with diverse interests participated in the hearing process. Actively participating parties, in addition to the company and staff, included the Department of State's Utility Intervention Unit, representatives of the Rockland County Executive and Rockland County Attorney's Office, and the Town of Ramapo. The proposed order before you today would deny the surcharge at this time and would determine the amount of project costs through March 2013 that are subject to recovery, and would clarify accounting principles relevant to AFUDC rate methodology and calculation. Those principles pertain to amounts that the company is carrying on its books related to this project. Lastly, the order would determine the treatment of legal services costs for which the company asserted privilege and provided redacted documentation. In the 2010 rate order, the Commission provided a new surcharge provision allowing the company to collect AFUDC or carrying costs after substantial construction of the project had commenced. A surcharge is an exception to the general rate-making principle that before ratepayers bear the costs of a regulatory asset, the asset should be placed in service. United Water acknowledges in its petition that construction hasn't occurred, but they assert that their environmental permit review before the state DEC has been delayed without explanation, and further that the company has done everything within their control consistent with the directives of the 2006 and 2010 rate orders to develop the new water supply source. In addition, the company asserts that implementing the surcharge now would avoid additional buildup of ratepayer liabilities. The proposed order finds that in establishing the in-construction trigger for initiating the surcharge, the Commission struck the right balance between protecting ratepayers and allowing the company some recovery of project costs for development of this significant multi-year project. The order would deny the surcharge in view of the determination in the companion need case that was just discussed, and also because the project construction trigger of the 2010 surcharge provision has not been met. However, the denial would be without prejudice to the company to renew its request for a surcharge in the future. Because the case was fully litigated, the order would determine that approximately $40 million of project costs incurred through March 2013 are subject to recovery at a later date. In addition, potentially over $4 million in legal services costs are potentially subject to recovery, as I will explain later in this presentation. However, costs determined in this order would be subject to adjustment, if any, resulting from matter 1402068, the recently instituted investigation that Joe Lochner spoke about earlier this morning. The first accounting principle addressed in the order concerns the proper rate methodology used to calculate AFUDC. There are two relevant time periods regarding AFUDC rate methodology. First, the term of the 2006 rate order, and secondly, the term of the 2010 rate order and subsequently. For the term of the 2006 order, the proposed order would approve the company's AFUDC rate methodology because that methodology was based upon the consolidated capital structure of United Water New York's parent corporation, United Water New Jersey, and it included lower-cost short-term debt. Therefore, the benefit of that lower-cost short-term debt was already being applied to ratepayers' benefit in that time period. For the term of the 2010 rate order and subsequently, the rates the Commission approved were not based on the consolidated parent corporation, but instead were set based solely on an assumed mix of long-term debt and equity. After the 2010 rate order was issued, the company recognized an opportunity in the short-term debt markets and met most of its financing needs for the project through short-term debt. The effect of the company's methodology would charge customers through the AFUDC rate for a cost of capital for the project at the higher rates assumed for rate-making purposes in the 2010 rate order, even though the company actually experienced much lower short-term borrowing costs during this period. For the term of the 2010 rate order and subsequently, the proposed order would require the use of short-term debt first, so that the benefit of lower-cost short-term debt will be applied to ratepayers' benefit for that time period as well. Consistent with the order, the company is directed to conform its books regarding AFUDC rate methodology, resulting in a write-off of approximately $5 million of AFUDC. The second accounting principle concerns the treatment of outreach and education expenses, or O&E. The proposed order provides that capitalization of O&E expenditures is limited to those expenditures required by specific statutory or regulatory provisions, consistent with USOA Rule 563.3A9. The company capitalized $2.6 million of O&E and related expenditures in its AFUDC calculation. However, the company did not establish on the record which of these costs was required by specific statutory or regulatory provisions. Therefore, the proposed order would disallow the $2.6 million of O&E from capitalization in the AFUDC calculation. Lastly, regarding legal services costs, United Water provided heavily redacted documentation to support approximately $4.4 million of legal services expenditures, asserting attorney-client privilege. Although the parties did not contest the redactions, the redacted documentation did not provide sufficient information for staff to conduct an audit of these legal expenditures. The proposed order would disallow the $4.4 million of legal services expenditures without prejudice to the company to refile a claim for these costs at a later time, supported by sufficient documentation to allow for a staff audit. In sum, the proposed order would deny the surcharge without prejudice to renew and determine that approximately $40 million of project costs through March 2013 are subject to recovery at a later time. That concludes my presentation. Are there any questions from the Commission?
I have just a question, and either you or I see Doris is here too, so I just want to, or John. She just punted to you, John. So here, the question is this: is just to be clear about what we're doing or we're not doing today. Effectively, what the company's requested is for the Commission to modify its 2010 order and allow for the commencement of collection of the surcharge prior to construction. And the justifications given were obviously the timing and the issue of the continued collection of interest that could be affected. That, as you said, it's unusual to allow for a collection of a cost for an asset that's yet to be constructed. It's even more unusual to do it before construction has even begun. And so I would agree that good cause in this instance isn't necessarily extant to say that we should start recovery this early. But what we're doing by the filing or the order today is essentially saying there are a number of the issues that have been litigated in terms of the amount or the cost that should be included in the surcharge that we need to give finality over. And we're providing that finality so we know what's in this bucket. And I think that will be helpful. So, again, as our theme around this, let's move on. And we get that finality. Then what's open then is the question of timing. And the question of timing is going to be somewhat dependent on what's next. And so what I understand in this order, and I just want to be very clear on this, is that in the event the determination is subsequently made that we do not need the desal alternative and other alternatives will be available, the order today, because it's without prejudice, is allowing the company to come back at that time and seek recovery even though the desal plant ultimately is not done. So there's nothing in this order that precludes the company or suggests that there's an impairment of these expenses, and in fact just recognizes that typically until an asset is actually used or under construction, we don't allow for recovery of expenses associated with that asset. Just so no one walks off and says, oh, if we don't do the desal plant, that means the surcharge is gone. We're not saying that. And that will be an issue that is developed when, at the time, we determine what solution is there. Is that correct? And I know it's reflected in the order. Thank you. I appreciate, by the way, the amount of work that's gone on this. I know it was a heavily litigated case. I agree with the adjustments that were made, and as indicated, I appreciate the fact that the company wants to, appreciate in the sense I understand the company wants to keep legal information confidential, but we can't do our work of looking at the accuracy or validity of expenses if we can't audit them. So it's really up to the company to determine if they believe that these are costs that should be included in the surcharge to waive their rights, which is their right to do around legal privilege. So we'll take that up in the future. But with that, I am prepared to vote in favor of this recommendation, and I'll open it up for any other questions or comments. Yes.
I also support the staff recommendation. I've been a utility attorney in the past, and I urge staff that should the company come in with that $4.5 million worth of legal expenses and the details of those expenses, to take a good hard look, because as a utility attorney, I did spend a good deal of time reviewing advertisements, outreach, education, consumer communications, and we'll want to take a look at whether those expenses relate to anything that we've disallowed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Giving away the tricks, huh?
These are, I think that to a person, we're all aware these are a very significant level of an expense. Included in the surcharge was a pilot plan, so this just there were costs and engineering costs associated with it, but clearly, I think that the staff and parties scrubbed all the expenses that are currently included in the surcharge, and if in fact legal expenses come in, we would expect them to be scrubbed as well. So, with that, I will take a vote. Are there all those in favor of the staff recommendation to deny the petition to implement the new long-term water supply surcharge, require the company to conform its book to the accrual levels consistent with the recommendations, and note again that this is without prejudice to refiling, indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Hearing no opposition, there being none, the recommendation is adopted. Thank you, Mr. Casuto, for a job well done.
Thank you.
Complicated cases today. Thank you all for that. And there were absolutely no water puns. I don't know. I'm waiting for Commissioner Brown. That was very fluid. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to the consent agenda. Are there any first of all, do any of the commissioners want to recuse or abstain from voting on the consent agenda? Okay, then with that and no comments, I'm going to then all those in favor of the recommendations on the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? There being no opposition, hearing none, the recommendations are adopted. Secretary Burgess, is there anything more in front of us today?
There's nothing more for today. The next commission session will be December 11th. It's noted on the website that it's December 4th, but it's been changed to December 11th, 10:30 right here.
Great. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day, everyone. Thank you. That was hard work.